Hi chess players, welcome to today's video. We are going to be looking at a chess opening called the Fried Liver Attack. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Let's check it out. The Fried Liver is an opening in which white hopes to take advantage of a pawn that's not as well protected in black's camp and put some pressure on that pawn and hope their opponent makes a mistake and white might be able to win very quickly. So this weak pawn that we're discussing is the f7 pawn for black because it's not as well protected as the other pawns because the king is the only piece that is protecting it. Same goes for white. The f2 pawn, again, can be a target because it is only protected by one piece, and that is the king. So in this opening, white starts off with pawn in front of the king up 2, and black responds in kind. And if you're a beginner chess player, new to chess, and you're looking for an opening to play, I recommend the pawn in front of your 2 for both sides. I think this is a really good opening, the double king pawn opening, to play with either side. And it's a really good way to start your game as a new chess player and just get some of these basic ideas down for what we're trying to accomplish in the opening. Okay, so next, white plays knight to f3, developing that knight, getting it off the back row, and threatening to capture the pawn on e5. Black can protect this pawn with a few moves. Today we're going to be looking at the most popular reply, which is knight to c6. Again, developing the knight, and now that knight is also protecting the pawn on e5. And next, white plays bishop to c4. We know in the opening phase of a chess game, we want to develop our minor pieces, our knights and our bishops, and we want to prepare to castle, and these moves do just that. And today we're going to be looking at this move from black, knight to f6, which is a perfectly fine move, developing the knight and also threatening to capture white's pawn on e4. What this move does allow for white to do is to go for the fried liver attack by playing knight to g5. And now white's idea is they have two pieces, the knight and the bishop, both attacking that weak f7 pawn. And remember, it's only protected by the king, so if a player has more attackers, in this case 2, then their opponent has defenders, in this case 1, well then that attack is going to work or that piece can be won. So white does have a threat in this position. Let's just make a random move. If your opponent does not see the threat, which at the beginner or amateur levels, maybe they won't see the threat of f7 being captured. So with a move like d6, white now has the option to capture f7. And they could capture it with the bishop, and that would be check. And after the king moves out of check, notice the king may not capture the bishop because it's protected by the knight. After the king moves somewhere to get out of check, well, now black has lost the right to castle. Their king is looking a little suspicious, and not to mention that they lost a clear pawn. So not great for black, and the other alternative is instead of the bishop capturing, would be the knight capturing on f7 and creating a fork. Right, this knight is double attacking both the queen and the rook at the same time and is going to win material in this position. Again, the king may not capture the knight because it's protected by the bishop, and after the queen moves somewhere to get out of danger, because we know a queen is more powerful than a rook, black would rather not lose the queen, then the knight can simply capture the rook, and white's won a good amount of material. And even if this knight is trapped, even if black at some point can capture this knight, white still came out with a material advantage because they captured a rook and a pawn. And if we're talking about our point system for piece values, a rook is worth 5 points, a pawn is worth 1. So even if white traded their knight that's worth 3, they still came out ahead in that exchange and will likely go on to have a good game and possibly win. So that is the idea for white in the fried liver attack, is to use both the knight and the bishop to attack that weak f7 square and hope that their opponent either doesn't know how to handle it or makes an error that leads to white winning material or winning the game. So now let's take a look at how we could stop the threat of either the bishop or the knight capturing f7 for the black pieces. Because as much as if you're playing with white, you want to use this to your advantage. Well, if you're playing this with black, there is a way to stop the threat of knight or bishop captures f7. It's actually a few moves, but today we're going to be looking at the main move. Let's try to find a move for black that prevents the knight or the bishop from capturing f7 and creating all those threats that we looked at. So feel free to pause your video. Try to find a move for black that prevents the threat of knight or bishop capturing f7. And the move we're going to look at is pawn to d5. And this cuts off the influence of the bishop. It may not jump over the pawn on d5. So now white only has the knight attacking f7, and it is possible for the knight to capture on f7. But that would be a sacrifice, and the king would likely capture back, and black has a material advantage, although their king did lose the right to castle in this game. That's one possibility. Another possibility is, well, white can simply capture this pawn. They could capture with their pawn. And now the main move for black is to move the knight to the edge of the board, which a general rule is not to move your knights to the edge of the board, but in this case, it threatens the bishop, and even if the bishop moves backwards and tries to stay on the diagonal, it gives black the option to capture that. And the alternative to moving the knight here, well, something we want to avoid with the black pieces is to capture this pawn with the knight. Because in this position, now white has a very nice sacrifice, and that is knight captures on f7. And we just discussed, well, if knight captures on f7, the king can capture back. But in this position, white can now play queen to f3, check, and this king is under attack, and now this knight is being attacked by two pieces. For instance, if this king just moves back to where it began, well, white is simply going to capture the knight with either the bishop or the queen. So really the only option for black is to move their king somewhere that helps protect the knight, and that is king to e6. And although black has more material, right, white sacrificed a knight for a pawn, black's king is looking very suspicious in the middle of the board here, and a chess engine might say that this is equal or close, but it seems much easier to play for white, and I would not recommend this. I would not recommend that you play this with the black pieces unless you have a great knowledge of the moves that you need to play to avoid all the pitfalls, because white's attack is very strong. So that's one possibility, or a few possibilities, in the fried liver attack. Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's video on the fried liver attack. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you get the opportunity to try that opening out. It is a really exciting and sharp and fun way to play a game of chess. So I hope you have great success with it, and I'll see you next time.